Silent stones hold the loudest stories of human history. This video explores the haunting enigma of cities that vanished at their cultural peak and what their ruins reveal. We will journey to lost capitals where art, music, and ideas reached a brilliant zenith, only to be swallowed by time. By the end, you will gain profound insights into our own civilization's trajectory and the delicate balance between creation and oblivion. Why would a thriving metropolis, at the height of its power and creativity, be suddenly abandoned? What secrets do its empty streets and forgotten artifacts whisper about ambition, fragility, and forgotten knowledge? What do you believe is the most important lesson a lost civilization can teach us? A hand brushes away centuries of sand to reveal a carved stone face staring into eternity. That moment of discovery, a connection across an unimaginable gulf of time, lies at the heart of our obsession with lost cities. We are drawn to these places not merely as tourists or scholars, but as storytellers seeking a narrative. A ruin represents a story interrupted at its most dramatic point, the final page forever torn away. Historian David Lowenthal captured this perfectly, calling ruins a bridge between what we were and what we are. They are not just piles of rock, they are frozen moments. Imagine the most vibrant, creative period of a society captured and preserved in its architecture, its art, its very street layout, and then suddenly abandoned. The music stopped, but the instruments were left exactly where they fell. This creates an irresistible puzzle. It combines profound beauty with a deep sense of melancholy, the tragedy of something magnificent brought to an end we cannot fully comprehend. This allure is what drives archaeologists to spend lifetimes in remote deserts, and what fuels our own imaginations when we see a photograph of a vine-choked temple. We look at these silent witnesses to a cultural peak, and we cannot help but ask the most human of questions: what happened here? What went wrong when everything seemed so right? This quest for answers is more than academic. It is a mirror we hold up to our own world. By seeking to understand why these civilizations evaporated at their height, we are ultimately asking a much more personal and urgent question about the durability of our own achievements. The mystery of their end makes us re-examine the fragility of every beginning. The first light of dawn touches the summit of the Pyramid of the Sun in Teotihuacan, not as a symbol of conquest, but as a perfect alignment of stone, shadow, and celestial knowledge. This is the essence of a cultural peak, a moment where a society's deepest values and highest aspirations become tangible in their world. It transcends mere wealth or military might, though those may be present. A true cultural peak is a flourishing of the human spirit so profound it defines a civilization's identity for all time. It is a brief, brilliant season where artistic vision, intellectual curiosity, architectural ambition, and social harmony converge. Think of it not as the loudest moment of an empire, but as its most beautiful and coherent symphony. This nuanced definition is our compass. It allows us to distinguish between a simple abandoned settlement and a true lost golden age, between a place that merely ended and one whose ending feels like a profound mystery. So what are the markers of such a peak? Look first to the ground plan. Masterful urban planning reflects a shared vision, a conscious design for living that balances monumentality with community, as seen in the vast ceremonial avenues and precisely oriented temples of ancient cities. Then examine the art. A cultural peak produces works that are not just decorative but speak a complex visual language, from intricate mosaics and lifelike sculptures to pottery that blends utility with breathtaking beauty. Intellectual innovation is another key indicator, whether it is the development of a writing system, advanced astronomical calendars, or breakthroughs in mathematics and engineering that seem to leap ahead of their time. Perhaps most subtly, there is a palpable sense of shared purpose, a cultural confidence woven into daily life, where art, ritual, and civic duty feel interconnected. This is the fragile ecosystem of a golden age. When we find a city frozen in time possessing these qualities, its silence is deafening. Its ruins are not just a collection of old buildings, they are the preserved score of a symphony that stopped mid-movement. Understanding this transforms our search from cataloging artifacts to listening for a lost melody, a melody that makes the subsequent silence all the more haunting. Deep within the humid embrace of the Chiapas rainforest, stone whispers a story of celestial alignment and royal ambition. The city of Palenque did not merely exist in its landscape, it conversed with it. Its temples, like the sublime temple of the inscriptions, were not just tombs for kings but were designed as resonant chambers, their stairways and corridors tuned with an acoustic precision that turned human speech into something otherworldly. This was a place where architecture, science, and spirituality were woven into a single fabric. At its cultural peak in the 7th century, Palenque was a nexus of Maya genius, ruled by the visionary Kainish Janab Pakal, or Pakal the Great. His reign, meticulously recorded in intricate hieroglyphic texts, was a renaissance. Artisans carved delicate stucco reliefs depicting gods and ancestors with a fluid, almost lifelike grace, while astronomers charted the movements of Venus with an accuracy that startles modern researchers. The city's very layout mirrored the Maya cosmos, a physical model of their understanding of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Here, governance was intertwined with cosmic duty, and art served as a bridge between the mortal and the divine. The ruins today are a testament to that breathtaking synthesis. You can stand in the palace courtyard and almost hear the echo of ceremonies, see the vivid pigments that once adorned every surface, and feel the intellectual confidence of a society that believed it had decoded the rhythms of time itself. Then the monuments stop. The latest dated inscription from Palenque falls near the close of the 8th century, and after that, only silence. The meticulous calendar carvings cease. No new stelae are raised to glorify future rulers. The grand plazas, once bustling with ritual and commerce, slowly empty. The jungle, patient and persistent, begins its long reclamation, vines threading through stone lattices and roots cradling forgotten altars. This was not a sudden cataclysm but a gradual dimming, a slow unraveling of the complex tapestry that held the city together. What the ruins now reveal to archaeologists is a story of interconnected pressures. Paleoclimate data suggests periods of severe drought that would have strained water resources and agriculture. Evidence points to political fragmentation as the bonds between Maya city-states weakened. There are signs of resource depletion, as the very growth and sophistication of the society may have overtaxed its environment. The silence of Palenque and of the entire Maya classic period collapse is a profound lesson in systemic fragility. It shows that a civilization can reach dazzling heights of cultural and intellectual achievement, creating art and knowledge that endure for millennia, yet still face challenges from the delicate ecological and social systems that support it. The stones of Palenque ask us a difficult question: how do the very pillars of a golden age, its population growth, its monumental projects, its complex social order, become the weights that eventually tip the balance? The intricate stucco reliefs of Palenque are more than art, they are a frozen language. Each flowing depiction of a maize god or a royal accession ceremony was a statement of cosmic order, a belief that human rulers were partners in maintaining the balance of the universe. This profound world finds its ultimate expression deep within the temple of the inscriptions. Descending its steep interior staircase is a journey into the Maya conception of eternity, leading to the massive, intricately carved sarcophagus of Pakal the Great. The lid alone is a masterpiece of symbolic storytelling, showing the king not in death, but in a dynamic moment of rebirth, falling down the world tree into the realm of the gods. This was not a monument to an ending, but to a transformative passage, reflecting a society that had woven its identity into the very fabric of the cosmos. Such confidence is echoed in the city's remarkable written records. The glyphs adorning temples and monuments provide a near-complete dynastic history, a rare and precious narrative thread in ancient Mesoamerica. We know the names of kings, the dates of victories, and the details of sacred rituals because they chose to tell us, carving their legacy directly into the living stone of their city. Yet these same stones also whisper of the pragmatic genius required to sustain such spiritual heights. Palenque's engineers mastered a challenging environment by creating an extensive aqueduct and water management system, using gravity to channel fresh water through the city center. This was not just utility, it was a form of architectural alchemy, turning the abundant rains of the rainforest from a threat into a life-giving resource. Meanwhile, workshops produced exquisite jewelry, fine pottery, and ceremonial objects exclusively for the elite, signaling a complex, stratified society where art was a pillar of political and religious power. Then the evidence shows this vibrant production simply ceased. The royal chronicles stop, no new monuments are commissioned. The sophisticated water channels eventually fall silent. Archaeologists reading this silent epilogue find clues not of a sudden invasion, but of a slow, systemic sigh. Pollen samples taken from ancient lake beds tell a story of increasing deforestation, likely to clear land for agriculture and to fuel the lime production needed for their iconic plaster and stucco. Studies of skeletal remains from the city's later periods point to increasing episodes of hardship and illness, suggesting periods of food scarcity. The picture that emerges is of a civilization that reached an incredible intellectual and artistic zenith, yet may have gradually strained the ecological foundation upon which it was built. The ruins of Palenque thus reveal a poignant duality, a society that could chart the stars and envision cosmic rebirth with stunning clarity, but which potentially could not foresee or adapt to the accumulating environmental pressures created by its own success. This revelation transforms the site from a mere archaeological wonder into a profound prompt for reflection. It asks us to consider the sustainability of any golden age and what it truly means for a civilization to be in harmony with its world, not just in its temples but in its fields and forests. A different kind of silence echoes from the baked brick streets of Mohenjo-Daro. Here, 4,500 years ago, a civilization reached a peak not of pyramids and royal tombs, but of profound civic order. Walking its excavated lanes in what is now Pakistan feels eerily modern. The city is laid out on a precise grid, with main avenues running north-south and smaller streets crossing at perfect right angles. Every home, from the largest to the more modest, was connected to a sophisticated, covered drainage system, a network of brick-lined channels that carried waste away from living quarters. At the heart of the city stood the Great Bath, a large, waterproofed public tank built with astonishing precision, likely used for ritual purification. This was a cultural zenith defined by hygiene, standardization, and a seemingly egalitarian social vision. Archaeologists have found no grand palaces, no towering temples dedicated to a single king or god. The most imposing structures are granaries and public works. The power here appears to have been invested in the system itself, in the collective good. This is seen most clearly in the bricks. For hundreds of years and across hundreds of miles of the Indus Valley, bricks were manufactured to a standardized ratio, their dimensions so consistent it suggests a unifying cultural authority, a shared blueprint for civilization. Craft production, from delicate stone weights for trade to distinctive fired clay seals, shows the same remarkable uniformity. This was a society that mastered the art of living together at an immense scale, creating a harmonious urban machine that thrived for centuries. Yet, this very uniformity makes its end so mysterious. There is no epic tale of invasion carved on its walls, for its elegant script found on those thousands of seals remains stubbornly undeciphered. Its history is written only in its ruins, and what those ruins reveal is deeply puzzling. Evidence suggests the city was not sacked. There are few signs of large-scale conflict. Instead, in some areas, valuables and everyday items seem to have been left in homes. The layers of sediment tell a story of eventual flooding from the mighty Indus River, but also of a gradual salinization of the soil, which would have crippled agriculture. Some researchers point to a possible shift in the river's course, slowly strangling the economic lifeblood of the city. The decline seems to have been a slow unraveling of the environmental and economic threads that held the urban fabric together. People may have simply left, dispersing back into smaller villages, taking their culture but abandoning the grand urban experiment. The silence of Mohenjo-Daro is therefore of a unique kind. It is not the silence of a fallen dynasty, but the quiet fading of a revolutionary idea. Its ruins pose a haunting question: can a civilization be too perfectly adapted, too uniform, to withstand profound change? When the environment shifted and the river that gave life became a source of disruption, did the very efficiency and standardization that made the city great also make it less resilient? The city's legacy is its plan, a blueprint for urban life so advanced it feels out of time, yet its empty streets remind us that no system, however well designed, exists independently from the world around it. The true story of Mohenjo-Daro is not written in grand monuments, but in the small, everyday objects its people left behind. Take the famous bronze statue known as the Dancing Girl. Just a few inches high, she stands with one hand on her hip, her body adorned with bangles, captured in a moment of effortless grace and motion. This tiny figure speaks volumes about a society that valued artistic expression and technical mastery, capable of the sophisticated lost wax casting required to create her. Yet an even more pervasive clue lies in the thousands of small, carved stone seals found throughout the city. These seals, often depicting animals like the unicorn-like bull, elephants, or rhinoceroses, and bearing that mysterious, undeciphered script, were likely used to stamp trade goods. Their sheer number and widespread discovery across the Indus Valley region point to a vast, organized network of commerce and communication. They suggest a society connected by shared symbols and economic relationships, a civilization that thrived on orderly exchange. The structural evidence deepens this portrait of a peaceful, meticulously planned society. Unlike many contemporary cities, Mohenjo-Daro lacks obvious fortifications. Archaeologists have not found evidence of major defensive walls, nor have they uncovered large caches of weapons that would indicate a society preparing for or experiencing large-scale conflict. The city's power seems to have been invested in infrastructure for living, not for war. Its greatest architectural achievements were those that supported community life and hygiene, like the Great Bath and the advanced drainage system that ran beneath its streets. However, the ground itself tells a different, more turbulent story. Geological studies of the site's many layers reveal a history punctuated by rebuilding. There are clear signs of repeated, catastrophic flooding from the Indus River. Layers of silt and clay interrupt the sequences of occupation, indicating that the city's inhabitants would return after a flood, repair the damage, and rebuild directly on top of the debris. This shows a society of remarkable resilience, one that refused to be permanently displaced by environmental challenge. But this cycle may not have been sustainable forever. Some researchers point to evidence of a possible shift in the river's course, which would have slowly starved the city of its water supply and trade routes. Furthermore, a small number of skeletal remains found in the uppermost layers of the city, discovered in streets and homes rather than in formal resting places, suggest a sudden, tragic event for some of its final inhabitants. While these remains do not point to an invasion, they may hint at a final, overwhelming disaster from which there was no return. The ultimate revelation from Mohenjo-Daro's ruins is a profound lesson in environmental vulnerability. Here was a civilization that mastered urban planning, standardized production, and social organization to an astonishing degree. It reached a cultural peak defined by harmony and collective efficiency. Yet its fate appears to have been sealed not by human enemies, but by the very river that gave it life. The story written in its seals and skeletons is one of a society that could design a perfect city, but could not control the forces of nature that surrounded it. This leads us to a civilization that faced the opposite, yet equally devastating, environmental challenge. A golden age that withered not from too much water, but from not enough. The sun sets over a landscape of granite, casting long shadows from walls that curve and rise without a drop of mortar. This is Great Zimbabwe, a city of stone that whispers of a kingdom built not on conquest, but on gold and trade. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, it stood as the thriving capital of the Shona people, a hub of commerce whose influence stretched from the African interior all the way to the ports of the Indian Ocean. Here, a cultural peak was measured in the weight of gold dust, the elegance of soapstone carvings, and the sheer audacity of its architecture. The great enclosure, with its massive, gracefully curved walls and mysterious conical tower, was not a fortress. It was a statement of spiritual and political authority, a place for the elite, designed to inspire awe and reinforce the sacred connection between the ruler and the divine. The surrounding valley was densely populated with homes of clay and thatch, workshops for crafting exquisite pottery, and markets buzzing with activity. This was a society at its zenith, sophisticated, wealthy, and confident. Its prosperity literally woven into trade networks that reached China and the Middle East. Then, around the middle of the 15th century, the capital was abandoned. The elite left the stone enclosures. The markets fell silent. The question hangs in the air like dust motes in a forgotten corridor. Why would a society walk away from the very epicenter of its power and identity? For centuries, colonial narratives refused to believe such an achievement could be African, attributing the ruins to Phoenicians or the Queen of Sheba. The stones themselves and the dedicated work of archaeologists have shattered those myths, revealing a truth far more compelling. The answer to the city's abandonment lies not in foreign intervention, but in the complex, shifting foundations of its own success. The primary driver appears to have been a simple reorientation of commerce. The gold trade that fueled Zimbabwe's wealth began to follow new routes. As trade networks shifted, the economic heart of the kingdom moved north, prompting the ruling elite to establish a new capital to better control these fresh avenues of prosperity. It was a strategic relocation, not a collapse. Environmental factors likely played a supporting role. Evidence suggests the dense population around the great stone complexes may have gradually depleted local resources like timber and game, while cattle grazing could have strained the soil. The city, in its success, may have slowly outgrown its immediate environment. This revelation transforms Great Zimbabwe from a mysterious ruin into a profound lesson in adaptive statecraft. Its abandonment was not a failure, but a calculated decision. The culture and the kingdom did not vanish, they evolved and moved, leaving behind the stone shell of a former capital as a monument to a different phase of their history. This challenges our very definition of disappearance. It shows that a city can be left behind not out of desperation, but as part of a deliberate, forward-looking strategy, a conscious choice to follow the currents of opportunity. The silent, majestic walls of Great Zimbabwe thus tell a story of resilience and pragmatism, a civilization confident enough to leave its greatest physical achievement behind in order to secure its future. Scattered among the stone foundations of Great Zimbabwe, you might find a small, glazed ceramic fragment with a blue floral pattern. To an untrained eye, it is just a piece of broken pottery. But to an archaeologist, it is a passport stamp from a world away, a piece of 14th century Chinese celadon porcelain. Alongside it, researchers have uncovered Persian glass vessels, cowrie shells from the Indian Ocean, and even a few Arabian coins. These are not the treasures of a hidden hoard, but the everyday debris of a global crossroads. They paint a vivid picture of a city deeply enmeshed in vast economic networks, where inland gold, ivory, and copper were exchanged for luxuries from across the known world. This material culture proves the kingdom was no isolated wonder, but a sophisticated, outward-looking participant in an early form of globalization. The stones themselves tell another story of mastery. The iconic walls, built without a single drop of mortar, are a testament to sophisticated engineering and social organization. This dry stone walling technique, using carefully shaped granite blocks, required immense skill. Each stone had to be selected and placed so that its weight and the friction between blocks created a structure of incredible stability, one that has endured for centuries. The scale of construction, particularly at the Great Enclosure, implies a vast, coordinated labor force, a society capable of mobilizing people not for war, but for monumental communal projects that expressed its collective identity and power. To feed that population, the people of Great Zimbabwe transformed their landscape. On the hills surrounding the city complex, they constructed extensive agricultural terraces. These stone-lined steps carved into the slopes did more than just create flat planting areas. They conserved precious soil and managed water runoff in a sometimes unpredictable climate. They represent a deep understanding of the local environment and a long-term commitment to sustaining a large, centralized community. Yet, this very success may have sown the seeds of change. Such intensive agriculture and the grazing of large cattle herds, central to the kingdom's wealth, can gradually deplete soil nutrients. Over generations, the land around the capital may have simply become less productive, less able to support the concentrated population its own success had created. This brings us to the most telling clue of all: what is not found in the ruins. There is no layer of ash from a great fire, no shattered weapons littering the streets, no mass memorial sites pointing to a sudden catastrophe. The archaeological record suggests a deliberate, orderly departure. It appears the elite and many inhabitants simply gathered their most valuable possessions and left. This points not to a collapse but to a strategic decision. The most likely catalyst was economic. The primary source of the kingdom's wealth was its control over the gold trade from the interior to the coast. As trade routes naturally shifted over time, or as new sources of gold were exploited elsewhere, the economic advantage of Great Zimbabwe's location diminished. The logical move for a pragmatic ruling class was to relocate the capital closer to the new centers of commerce and production. Therefore, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe reveal something far more revolutionary than a mystery. They reveal a civilization's capacity for strategic adaptation. This was not a society that fell, but one that chose to move. Its story reshapes our understanding of urbanism, showing that a city's end is not always a tragedy. Sometimes it is a calculated step in an ongoing story of resilience. The empty stone enclosures stand not as a monument to failure, but as a testament to a kingdom confident enough to leave its greatest architectural achievement behind in pursuit of continued prosperity. This fluid, dynamic view of civilization forces us to look beyond the Mediterranean and Mesopotamian models of cataclysmic collapse and to consider a different narrative altogether, one of purposeful transformation. A dolphin leaps across a sun-bleached plaster wall, frozen in an eternal arc of grace and motion. This vibrant fresco from the Palace of Knossos on Crete is a window into a world unlike any other in the ancient Mediterranean. Around 3,600 years ago, the Minoan civilization reached a dazzling cultural peak, one defined not by fortifications and warrior kings, but by artistry, maritime trade, and a seeming love for life. Their sprawling palace complexes, of which Knossos was the grandest, were not citadels. They were the vibrant hearts of a sophisticated society, with multi-story buildings, light wells, advanced plumbing systems with terracotta pipes, and vast storerooms called magazines that held the wealth of a sea-based empire. The famous labyrinthine layout, which may have inspired later myths, speaks to a complex, centralized administration, likely one where religious and political authority were deeply intertwined. The art tells the rest of the story. Frescoes everywhere depict elegant processions, peaceful nature scenes, and the iconic bull leaping ritual, a possibly ceremonial sport showcasing agility and courage. Their pottery, decorated with flowing marine life and abstract patterns, was exported across the Aegean, spreading Minoan aesthetic influence far and wide. This was a culture confident in its prosperity and its connection to the sea, a true thalassocracy or sea power at the height of its creative and commercial reach. Then, in the middle of the second millennium before the Common Era, this brilliant chapter abruptly closes. The Palace of Knossos shows evidence of massive fire damage and violent destruction. The vibrant artwork is buried under collapsed walls. The precise cause of this rapid downfall has been one of history's most enduring puzzles, and the ruins hold clues to a perfect storm of catastrophes. The most dramatic suspect is the colossal volcanic eruption on the island of Thera, modern Santorini, which occurred sometime close to this period. This was one of the largest volcanic events in human history. While the exact timeline is debated, the effects would have been apocalyptic for the Minoans. A towering tsunami would have ravaged the northern coasts of Crete, devastating its vital fleet and port cities. Thick layers of volcanic ash would have blanketed the island, smothering crops and plunging the region into a prolonged period of climate disruption, what we might call a volcanic winter. The psychological and religious impact on a culture so attuned to the natural world would have been immeasurable, yet nature may not have acted alone. In the layers of ash and debris, archaeologists also find a change in material culture. The elegant Minoan pottery styles are gradually replaced by cruder, more martial forms associated with the Mycenaeans from mainland Greece. This suggests that in the wake of the natural disaster, with their navy broken and their economy in ruins, the weakened Minoan centers could not resist encroachment or outright conquest by their formerly subordinate trading partners. The Palace of Knossos itself was later reoccupied and rebuilt in a distinctly Mycenaean style. The ruins of Knossos thus reveal a chilling possibility that a civilization can be struck a knockout blow not by a single enemy, but by a catastrophic convergence. A natural disaster of unprecedented scale crippled the physical and economic foundations of Minoan society, creating a power vacuum that more militaristic neighbors were poised to fill. The peaceful, artistic world of the dolphin frescoes and the bull leapers did not simply fade. It was likely overwhelmed from without and within by forces its maritime mastery could not withstand. This story of a dual collapse, environmental and political, forces us to look for a city whose end was whispered, not shouted, a disappearance so quiet and complete it would erase an entire people from memory for over 1,000 years. Beneath the colorful frescoes of Knossos, the ground tells a darker story. Archaeologists digging through the palace's foundations encounter a distinct grayish layer, a silent witness to a day when the sky turned to fire. This is volcanic ash, chemically matched to the colossal eruption on the island of Thera, over 60 miles away. Its presence here is a chilling clue. The immediate aftermath would have been apocalyptic. A tsunami of unimaginable height would have scoured the northern coast of Crete, where the Minoan navy, the source of their wealth and security, was anchored. Ports and coastal settlements would have been swallowed in an instant. Then came the ash fall, blanketing fields, choking waterways, and plunging the region into a prolonged period of dimmed sunlight and failed harvests. For a civilization whose economy and identity were built on maritime trade and agriculture, this was not just a bad season, it was an existential blow. The very pillars of their thalassocracy were shattered by natural forces beyond any human strategy. Amidst this layer of ash, another mystery persists. Excavators have found hundreds of clay tablets inscribed with the elegant, still undeciphered script known as Linear A, used by palace administrators to record inventories of goods, shipments, and perhaps religious offerings. These tablets represent the bureaucratic heartbeat of Minoan society. After the disaster, this script vanishes from the archaeological record. In its place at Knossos and other sites appears Linear B, an adapted form of writing used to record an early form of Greek. The silent replacement of an entire writing system is one of archaeology's most profound testimonies. It signals more than just a change in bookkeeping. It marks the death of a language and the administrative takeover by a new power. The physical ruins complete this story of erasure. Sections of the palace show clear evidence of intense fire, with stones cracked by heat and layers of charcoal. But Knossos was not left a hollow shell. Above the destruction, new walls were built, thicker and more utilitarian in style. The architecture shifts, and the artifacts found in these upper layers, pottery, tools, weaponry, are distinctly Mycenaean. The vibrant, fluid art of the Minoans gives way to forms that are stiffer, more focused on martial themes. What the ruins of Knossos ultimately reveal is a cascade of collapse. A natural catastrophe of geologic scale delivered the first devastating shock, crippling the infrastructure and spirit of a sophisticated culture. In that vulnerable moment, external forces, perhaps already present as trading partners or rivals, moved in. The result was not a merger, but a cultural overwriting. The brilliant, peaceable world depicted in the bull-leaping frescoes was not conquered in a single battle. It was first broken by nature and then administratively dismantled, its story buried under ash and its voice silenced by a new alphabet. This layered demise forces a humbling perspective, showing how even the most advanced and artistic civilizations exist within a fragile balance, vulnerable to shocks from both the earth below and the ambitions next door. The silence that followed the eruption at Thera was absolute, a cultural erasure so complete it feels like a historical void. Yet another city's disappearance was not marked by catastrophe, but by a slow, inexorable quiet, the sound of wealth no longer flowing. Deep within a winding sandstone canyon in southern Jordan, a hidden doorway to that silence still stands. The narrow fissure of the Sick, a natural geological wonder, served as the grand processional entrance to the Nabatean capital of Petra. For over a kilometer, the path twists through towering cliffs, the light dim and the air cool, building a sense of profound anticipation. Then the canyon parts, and the first glimpse of Al-Kosne, the treasury, emerges, its ornate facade glowing in the filtered sun. This was not merely a tomb or a temple. It was a monumental advertisement, a breathtaking declaration of wealth and sophistication carved directly into the living rock. Petra was a city built on scent, on the unimaginable value of frankincense and myrrh. These rare resins, essential for rituals across the ancient world, traveled on caravan routes from southern Arabia to the Mediterranean. Petra sat at the perfect crossroads, and the Nabateans became the masterful middlemen of this aromatic gold. At its peak from the 1st century before the Common Era to the 1st century of our era, the city was a dazzling fusion of cultures and a staggering feat of environmental adaptation. The Nabateans were hydrological geniuses. In a landscape that receives only a few inches of rain each year, they engineered an intricate network of dams, cisterns, and ceramic pipelines. They captured every precious drop of seasonal floodwater, channeling it through the city to supply homes, fill lavish garden pools, and even feed a monumental nymphaeum or public fountain. They transformed a desert wadi into a lush, habitable oasis, proving that human ingenuity could make the impossible not just possible, but opulent. This mastery is etched into the very stone. The famous rock-cut tombs and temples display a breathtaking synthesis of artistic influences. You can see the elegant pediments and columns of Hellenistic Greece, the monumental scale of Egypt, and the intricate reliefs of Assyria, all blended into a uniquely Nabatean style. This was not imitation, it was confident curation, the visual language of a cosmopolitan people who interacted with every major civilization of their time and made those elements their own. The city's heart was a broad colonnaded street lined with shops, temples, and a massive theater carved into the hillside, capable of seating thousands. Petra was a bustling, wealthy, and astonishingly green metropolis in the middle of a desert, the ultimate testament to a society that had turned geographic challenge into unparalleled advantage. Yet, the very specialization that made Petra a legend also contained the seeds of its quiet decline. The city's entire reason for being was its control over overland trade. When the Roman Empire, which had gradually absorbed the Nabatean kingdom, fully mastered sea travel across the Red Sea, a fundamental shift occurred. It became cheaper, faster, and safer to transport incense and spices by ship directly from Arabia to Egyptian ports like Berenice, bypassing the long, costly desert caravan routes entirely. Petra's economic lifeline was slowly severed. There was no invasion, no earthquake, no single moment of downfall. Instead, there was a gradual but relentless economic obsolescence. The great caravans grew smaller, then ceased. The gardens, without the wealth and labor to maintain the exquisite water systems, began to wither. The wealthy merchant families likely moved to new centers of commerce. The magnificent tombs became mere monuments, their purpose forgotten. The city emptied not in a panic, but in a slow exodus toward opportunity. By the time of the great Islamic empires, Petra was a memory, known only to local Bedouin tribes, its true name lost to history, remembered only as the place of the rocks Al-Petra. The ruins, therefore, tell a story of fragile interdependence. They reveal a civilization that could bend a harsh desert to its will, creating hydraulic marvels and architectural splendors, but which could not bend the broader currents of global economics. Petra's silence is the echo of caravan bells that stopped ringing, a reminder that a city, no matter how brilliantly engineered or artistically gifted, cannot survive when the world decides to take a different road. The true genius of Petra is not carved on its facades, but hidden within the rock itself. To walk the city today is to trace the ghost of a water system of breathtaking sophistication. Along the canyon walls, you can still see the narrow channels, meticulously carved to capture every trickle of winter rainwater. These channels fed into a network of ceramic pipes and massive underground cisterns, some large enough to hold thousands of gallons. The Nabateans did not just find water in the desert, they designed an entire city to harvest, store, and distribute it with the precision of a modern engineer. This hydraulic mastery made the impossible possible, supporting not just survival but a level of luxury that included public fountains, lush gardens, and even swimming pools. The water system was the city's beating heart, a testament to a society that understood its environment intimately and turned severe limitation into a source of power and pride. This mastery funded the city's breathtaking stone monuments, high above the main valley, reached by a winding path of 800 steps. The monastery, or Allure, looms. Its facade is even larger than the treasury, a monumental statement of faith and prestige carved into a remote cliff face. Similarly, The row of immense royal tombs overlooking the city center speaks of a society deeply invested in the journey beyond life. These were not just burial places, they were public declarations of status designed for eternal remembrance. The blend of architectural styles, Greek pediments, Egyptian cornices, Assyrian reliefs shows a culture confident enough to adopt and adapt the artistic language of the entire known world, weaving it into a unique Nabatean identity. Yet the stones also record a slow, subtle change. After the Roman annexation in 106 of the Common Era, new structures were built in a distinctly Roman style, like the colonnaded street and the monumental gate. While this brought a new layer of grandeur, it also signals a shift in cultural and political authority. More telling is what stops being built. The carving of new, elaborate rock-cut tombs gradually ceases. The ambitious hydraulic projects see fewer repairs and updates. The archaeological record shows a gradual simplification of material goods, a quiet shift from lavish imported wares to more local, utilitarian pottery. This decline was punctuated by natural disasters. Major earthquakes in the 4th and 7th centuries caused significant damage, collapsing buildings and likely rupturing the delicate water channels. While these were severe blows, cities can and do rebuild after quakes if they have the wealth and will to do so. Petra, by these later centuries, seemed to lack both. The core revelation from its silent streets and dry cisterns is not of a city destroyed by nature, but of one slowly starved of purpose. The lifeblood of long-distance caravan trade had been rerouted by sea. The economic reason for Petra's existence, and for the immense effort required to sustain life in such a place, simply evaporated. The ruins therefore stand as a profound lesson in economic fragility. They show that a society can achieve near miraculous feats of environmental adaptation, creating a verdant paradise in a barren landscape through sheer ingenuity. It can develop a rich, syncretic culture and express it in art that stuns the senses centuries later. But if the economic foundation upon which that entire edifice is built shifts, even the most brilliant adaptation can become a relic. Petra's silence is the sound of wealth moving elsewhere, a reminder that the fortunes of a city are as fluid as the water it once so brilliantly captured, and just as capable of slipping away. High on a sun-baked mesa in the American Southwest, entire villages seem to grow directly from the cliff face. In the 12th and 13th centuries, the alcoves of what is now Mesa Verde National Park were home to a remarkable society. Here, the ancestral pueblones reached a cultural peak of a different kind, one defined not by sprawling urban grids or monumental temples to kings, but by profound community cohesion and ingenious adaptation to a marginal environment. Their greatest architectural achievements were not palaces, but multi-story apartment complexes of sandstone and mortar, meticulously fitted into the protective overhangs of canyon walls. Places like Cliff Palace, with its 200 rooms and 23 kivas, represent a breathtaking investment of collective labor. These were not temporary shelters, but permanent, sophisticated homes designed for generations, complete with ventilation systems, carefully plastered walls, and strategic orientations to capture winter sun and summer shade. The kivas, circular subterranean chambers entered by ladder from above, were the spiritual and social heart of each community, spaces for ceremony, decision-making, and the transmission of knowledge. This was a zenith of communal living, where architecture literally bound the community to the land and to each other. The material culture found in these cliff dwellings speaks of a rich and settled life. Archaeologists have uncovered beautifully painted black-on-white pottery, finely woven cotton textiles, and intricate turquoise and shell jewelry that indicate not just skill, but a deep aesthetic tradition and participation in trade networks stretching to the Pacific and Mesoamerica. Their agricultural prowess was equally sophisticated. On the mesa tops above the cliffs, they practiced advanced dry farming techniques, constructing check dams and terraces to conserve precious soil and channel scant rainfall to their fields of maize, beans, and squash. For over a century, this system thrived, supporting a growing population in a landscape that offered little margin for error. Then, in the late 13th century, the alcoves fell silent. The pottery styles ceased to evolve. The hearths grew cold. Within a few generations, the people who had built these intricate stone villages gathered their belongings and left, migrating south to new lands along the Rio Grande and in Arizona. They did not vanish, but the places they called home for centuries were completely and permanently vacated. The mystery is not one of extinction, but of mass, organized departure. Why leave such labor-intensive, defensible, and spiritually significant homes? The answer is written in the landscape itself and in the silent archives of tree rings. Studies of ancient timber beams from the cliff dwellings provide a precise climatic record, a year-by-year diary of environmental stress. The data reveals a prolonged and severe period of drought beginning around 1276, a dry spell that lasted for more than 2 decades. For a society dependent on carefully managed dry farming, this was a catastrophe in slow motion. Springs and seeps dried up, crops failed year after year. The meticulous water conservation systems could not compensate for a sky that withheld rain for a generation. Alongside this climatic crisis, other pressures mounted. The very success of their society had led to a peak population that may have strained local resources even before the drought. There is also archaeological evidence of increasing social tension, perhaps conflict between communities over dwindling resources, as some sites show signs of being fortified or located in more defensible positions. The decision to migrate, therefore, appears not as a sudden panic, but as a collective, cultural response to an unsustainable situation. The ruins of Mesa Verde reveal a society that reached an incredible harmony with a challenging environment, but which ultimately faced a convergence of challenges climatic, demographic, and social, that their adaptive strategies could not overcome in place. Their legacy is not one of failure, but of resilience in a different form. They chose to preserve their culture by moving it, trading the magnificent stone villages of their ancestors for a future elsewhere. This grand migration reminds us that sometimes the ultimate act of a civilization is not to stand firm against change, but to recognize when it is time to walk toward a new horizon, carrying their identity with them. The final layer of plaster on a kiva wall holds a story more profound than any written record. Within the silent alcoves of Mesa Verde, it is the small, subtle clues that speak loudest about the community's final days. Scientists turn to the very timbers that supported these homes, using dendrochronology, the study of tree rings, to read the annual diary of the climate. The pattern is stark and devastating. Starting around 1276, the rings narrow dramatically, indicating a severe, prolonged drought that gripped the region for over 20 years. For a society whose entire agricultural system was a delicate dance with scant rainfall, this was not a hardship, it was an existential crisis. Springs vanished, and carefully tended fields on the mesa tops yielded less and less, season after punishing season. The ruins themselves bear witness to the mounting strain. Archaeologists note a fascinating shift in animal bones found in the dwellings. There is a marked increase in the remains of domesticated turkeys, alongside evidence of pens built right into the living spaces. This suggests a crucial adaptation, a move away from relying solely on wild game, which would have become scarce, toward a more controlled, dependable source of protein within the community itself. Another telling sign comes from the buildings. In the final phases of occupation, there is evidence of recycling, of using timbers and stones from older, abandoned rooms to patch or construct new ones. This points to a growing scarcity of fresh construction materials, or perhaps a reluctance to venture far from the protective cliffs to gather them. What is notably absent, however, is as revealing as what is present. Despite the intense pressure, researchers find little evidence of large-scale violence, no mass memorial sites, and no signs of invasion. The departure does not appear to have been forced by an outside enemy. This brings us to the most poignant clue of all, the final plastering of the kivas. In several of these sacred circular chambers, the walls were meticulously given one last, smooth coat of clay plaster. This was not a repair, but a deliberate act of closure. It is interpreted by many as a ceremonial farewell, a way of spiritually sealing and honoring a space that had been the heart of community life for generations before walking away. Together, these clues transform the narrative of Mesa Verde from a simple tale of abandonment into a profound story of deliberate choice. The migration south was likely a conscious, communal decision made in the face of an insurmountable environmental challenge. It was not a collapse, but an adaptation on a grand scale, a difficult choice to preserve their culture and community by seeking a new beginning where water and hope were more abundant. The sealed kivas stand not as tombs but as time capsules, left with reverence by a people resilient enough to change their address, but not their identity. The sealed kivas of Mesa Verde represent a conscious farewell, but in the jungles of Southeast Asia, an entire metropolis was given no such ceremony. Instead, it was slowly, silently claimed by a sea of green. The rising sun first touches the 5 lotus bud towers of Angkor Wat, illuminating a stone cosmos frozen in time. This temple, built in the 12th century by King Suryavarman II, is more than a monument. It is the ultimate expression of the Khmer Empire's cultural and spiritual zenith. It was designed as a physical model of the Hindu universe, with its central tower representing Mount Meru, the home of the gods, surrounded by smaller peaks, concentric galleries, and a massive moat symbolizing the cosmic ocean. The sheer scale is staggering, but the true genius of Angkor lies not just in its temples but beneath them. This was a hydraulic city, an urban masterpiece engineered for water. The Khmer transformed a flood-prone plain into a managed landscape of astonishing complexity. They constructed vast, rectangular reservoirs called barrays, each one an artificial inland sea, alongside a sprawling network of canals, dikes, and intricate community ponds. This system did more than prevent floods. It captured monsoon rains to irrigate rice paddies, supporting a population that may have exceeded 1 million people at its peak. It turned seasonal scarcity into year-round abundance, fueling the empire's growth and enabling the construction of wonders like the walled city of Angkor Thom and the enigmatic Bayon Temple, with its serene, towering stone faces gazing in every direction. The cultural output was breathtaking. Kilometer-long bas-reliefs at Angkor Wat do not just depict gods and epics. They show detailed scenes of daily life, celestial dances, and vast military processions, creating a stone archive of a society at the height of its power, artistry, and confidence. This was a regional superpower, a political and religious magnet whose influence stretched across mainland Southeast Asia. Yet, by the 15th century, the epicenter of power shifted south, and the great stone heart of Angkor was left to the jungle. The question its ruins pose is profound. Why would an empire abandon an infrastructural marvel that was the very source of its wealth? The traditional narrative pointed to invasion by the neighboring Ayutthaya kingdom, a single catastrophic event. But modern research, reading the landscape like a historical text, suggests a more complex and gradual unraveling. The very water management system that was Angkor's triumph may have also been its Achilles heel. Maintaining such an immense, interconnected network required constant, centralized labor and expert administration. Sediment cores taken from the barrays and canals tell a story of increasing siltation and infrastructure failure over time. Furthermore, studies of tree rings from the region indicate a series of severe droughts in the 14th century, followed by intense monsoon floods. This climatic volatility, swinging between extremes, would have been catastrophic for a system built on precise water control. A prolonged drought would empty the reservoirs, while a sudden, massive flood could breach dikes and choke canals with silt, potentially faster than a strained bureaucracy could repair them. This environmental stress likely intersected with political and religious change. The empire's focus shifted toward maritime trade, making coastal cities more economically strategic. Simultaneously, the state religion transitioned from Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism, a shift that may have altered the relationship between the god-king and the monumental temple-building projects that required vast corvée labor. The ruins, therefore, reveal a story of intertwined pressures. They show a civilization that achieved a staggering harmony with its environment through engineering, creating one of the most extensive pre-industrial urban landscapes on Earth. But they also suggest that this harmony was delicate, requiring stable climate and unwavering social coordination to maintain. When the climate became unpredictable and the political will or resources to maintain the system faltered, the balance was lost. Angkor did not fall to a sudden sack. It was gradually relinquished, its life-sustaining waterways falling into disrepair as the focus of the kingdom moved on. The jungle did not destroy the city, it simply moved in after the engineers left, wrapping the stones in a silent, green embrace. This revelation forces us to see abandonment not always as a defeat, but sometimes as a strategic reorientation, a choice made when the cost of sustaining a monumental past outweighs the promise of a different future. The stone faces of the Bayon gaze serenely over a canopy that now hides far more than it reveals. For centuries, the true scale of Angkor was a mystery, its grand temples seeming to rise from an empty jungle. Then, a technology designed for mapping terrain from the air peeled back the green veil. LiDAR, a form of laser scanning, sent pulses of light through the dense foliage, digitally stripping away the trees to map the ground beneath. The resulting images were a revelation. They showed not just isolated temple complexes, but a vast, low-density metropolis sprawling across hundreds of square miles. The laser maps revealed the ghostly grid of city blocks, neighborhood ponds, and an impossibly intricate web of canals and roads, all connecting to the monumental reservoirs. This was not merely a ceremonial center, but one of the largest pre-industrial cities in the world, a hydraulic machine of staggering ambition. The scale of the water network was breathtaking, a testament to a society that had reshaped its entire landscape to support a colossal population. Yet this very scale contained a hidden vulnerability. Such a system was not a one-time construction. It was a living entity that demanded constant, meticulous care. The sediment cores extracted from the bottom of the Great Barrays tell the next chapter of this story. These cylindrical samples of layered mud are like tree rings for a water system. They show a clear, gradual accumulation of silt over the centuries. As the surrounding forests were cleared for agriculture and settlement, erosion increased. Soil washed into the canals and reservoirs, slowly but surely reducing their capacity. A system designed to buffer against drought and flood became shallower, less efficient, and more prone to catastrophic failure during periods of climatic stress. Maintaining it would have required an ever-increasing investment of organized labor, a relentless dredging operation just to keep the lifeblood of the city flowing. At the same time, the spiritual landscape was undergoing its own transformation. Walk from the Hindu narratives of Angkor Wat to the later Bayon, and you witness a subtle but profound shift in iconography. The intricate carvings begin to reflect the Theravada Buddhist influences, a faith that emphasized personal enlightenment over the grandiose cosmic symbolism of the god-king. This was more than an artistic trend, it represented a deep societal change. The king was no longer seen as a divine incarnation requiring monumental stone mountains to house his spirit. This theological shift likely altered the very purpose of the state. The immense corvée labor required to maintain Angkor's hydraulic and architectural wonders may have become philosophically unjustifiable or simply less of a political priority as royal authority expressed itself in new ways. The ruins therefore reveal a slow-motion convergence, an increasingly fragile and high-maintenance engineered environment stressed by siltation and a changing climate, met a society whose religious and political foundations were evolving. The idea of a single, dramatic invasion as the cause of Angkor's end fades before this more nuanced picture. It appears the city was not so much sacked as it was gradually deprioritized. When the costs of sustaining that monumental landscape, both physical and social, began to outweigh its perceived benefits, the center of gravity simply moved. The elite and the administrative machinery likely shifted south toward emerging trade centers, and the greatest urban experiment of its age was slowly surrendered to the roots and the rain. This quiet departure asks us to reconsider what we mean by collapse, suggesting that sometimes a civilization's greatest act of adaptation is knowing when to let go of a place, even one of unparalleled grandeur, in order to preserve its enduring spirit. Far to the east of the Mediterranean, where the Karakum Desert now swallows the horizon, a different kind of city once thrived on the lifeblood of a river now lost to sand. Gonur was not a single building but a sprawling, fortified complex of high walls and carefully arranged streets, the beating heart of a culture so enigmatic it lacks even an ancient name. Today, we know it as a central pillar of the Oxus civilization, a Bronze Age society that reached its zenith around 4,000 years ago. This was a world apart, yet astonishingly connected. Within its workshops, artisans mastered advanced metallurgy, producing exquisite silver and gold vessels alongside practical bronze tools. Their seals and artifacts, discovered in ruins from Mesopotamia to the Indus Valley, reveal a web of trade that placed them at the crossroads of continents. The city itself, with its distinct ceremonial precincts, residential quarters, and industrial zones, speaks of a society with a clear vision of order, a shared purpose strong enough to build a metropolis in what was then a fertile river delta. This was a cultural peak carved from clay and forged in fire, a testament to human ingenuity in a landscape that offered no easy bounty. Then, the entire civilization, and Gonur along with it, faded into silence, buried by the dunes of one of the world's most unforgiving deserts. The mystery is not of a violent end, but of a slow evaporation. What could cause a sophisticated, networked society to simply dissolve, leaving its cities to be reclaimed by dust? The clues point not to invaders, but to a profound and irreversible change in the earth itself. The rivers that sustained this world, branches of the mighty Oxus, began to shift their courses and ultimately fail, victims of a changing climate. The green delta that cradled Gonur gradually transformed into the arid Karakum, turning a cradle of civilization into a sea of sand. The ruins, therefore, tell a story of ultimate environmental dependency. They reveal a society that could master metal, commerce, and urban design, creating a vibrant culture through sheer will and organization. Yet, when the fundamental hydrological map of their region was redrawn by forces beyond their control, all that mastery became a monument to a lost equilibrium. The abandoned kilns and silent temples of Gonur pose a haunting question about the foundations of any society, no matter how brilliant or connected. What happens when the landscape itself decides to rewrite the rules? Buried beneath the desert, a single artifact can whisper an entire cosmology. Within the high walls of Gonur archaeologists uncovered a structure that redefined their understanding of this lost society, a building now known as the Fire Temple. This was no ordinary workshop or home. Its design centered on a specially constructed altar, a place where the evidence of repeated, intense fires was found alongside a collection of unique ritual vessels. These finds suggest a spiritual practice focused on a sacred flame, a possible early form of worship that would later evolve into Zoroastrianism, one of the world's oldest continuously practiced religions. This discovery is monumental. It tells us that the people of the Oxus civilization were not just skilled traders and metalworkers, they were deep thinkers grappling with fundamental questions of existence, creating a formalized, sophisticated spiritual life at the very heart of their city. Their material wealth found in the same soil underscores this cultural richness. Excavations have yielded stunningly delicate ivory combs, their teeth still finely spaced after 4,000 years. They found beads and inlays of deep blue lapis lazuli, a stone that could only have come from mines hundreds of miles away in what is now Afghanistan. Most telling are the exquisitely crafted silver and gold vessels, some decorated with intricate mythological beasts, demonstrating a mastery of metallurgy and an artistic vision that rivaled any contemporary civilization. These were not mere possessions, they were statements of identity, wealth, and connection to a vast world. The presence of such luxury goods, sourced through long-distance trade networks, proves Gonur was a cosmopolitan hub, a place where ideas and aesthetics flowed as freely as goods. Yet, for all this sophistication, the most critical revelation about their fate did not come from a treasure chest, but from the empty sky and the barren ground. Geomorphologists, scientists who study the history of landscapes, have mapped the ancient ghost of the Murghab River. Their work shows the clear, sandy scar of its former bed, a path that once brought life, giving water directly to the city's gates. The data reveals this river began to dry up and shift its course, a slow-motion disaster driven by climatic change. The green oasis that supported the fields, the people, and the very reason for Gonur existence gradually turned to dust. The ruins, therefore, tell a story of breathtaking achievement built upon a foundation of profound environmental dependency. This was a brilliant but oasis-locked civilization. Their entire cultural complex, from the fire temple rituals to the ivory carvers' workshops, was predicated on one fragile, irreplaceable resource, a reliable river. When that source failed, no amount of artistic genius or spiritual fervor could hold back the desert. Their world did not end with a bang, but with a parched whisper, as the sands they had held at bay for centuries finally swept in to reclaim their streets and altars. This silent departure offers perhaps the starkest lesson of all, that the most advanced culture is ultimately a guest in its environment, and when the land changes the terms of that relationship, even the most luminous golden age can fade into the dunes. The silence of Gonur is a testament to a river's betrayal, but on the opposite side of the world, another city's end was written in the very soil its people built upon. Rising from the floodplain where the Mississippi and Missouri rivers meet, a series of grassy, man-made mountains once defined the skyline. Around the year 1050 of the Common Era, Cahokia was not just a large village, it was a genuine metropolis, a bustling urban center of perhaps 20,000 souls, making it the largest city north of Mexico for its time. This was a pre-Columbian capital of staggering ambition, a place where a sophisticated society orchestrated the movement of millions of baskets of earth to reshape their world. At its heart stood Monk's Mound, the largest prehistoric earthen structure in the Americas, a colossal platform rising 100 feet high, with a base larger than the Great Pyramid of Giza. From its summit, rulers could survey a vast central plaza flanked by more than 100 other mounds, some for burial, some for temples, and others marking the homes of the elite. The city was a hive of activity, with neighborhoods of thatched houses, bustling markets trading in goods from across the continent, and a clear social hierarchy visible in the goods buried with individuals. Cahokia's cultural peak was a symphony of coordinated labor, spiritual ceremony, and cosmological understanding. This is most elegantly demonstrated by Woodhenge, a great circle of wooden posts rebuilt several times which functioned as a precise solar calendar. On the equinoxes, an observer standing at the central post would see the sun rise directly over a marker post, aligning the city's rituals with the cycles of the heavens. Here was a society deeply connected to the land, the sky, and the complex trade routes that fed its growth. Yet, by the 14th century, the Grand Plaza lay empty. The posts of Woodhenge rotted away, the thatched houses returned to the earth, and the mounds were left to the grasses. The city dissolved, not with a clash of arms from an outside force, but with a quiet, internal sigh. The ruins, now a serene landscape of gentle hills, pose a poignant question. How does a city of such scale and sophistication simply empty itself? The clues point not to a single enemy, but to a web of interconnected pressures that slowly frayed the social fabric. Archaeological evidence reveals signs of increasing social stress over time. Defensive wooden palisades were built and rebuilt around the central precinct, suggesting periods of tension, perhaps conflict between factions within the city or with neighboring groups. Studies of human remains from later periods indicate a rise in physical indicators of hardship and illness, pointing to nutritional stress within the population. Most compelling, however, is the environmental narrative written in the soil cores and tree rings. Cahokia's success was built on a rich floodplain, but that very fertility was vulnerable. A period of favorable, wet climate likely fueled the agricultural boom that supported its initial population explosion. Later, the climate became more unstable, with significant swings between severe floods and prolonged droughts. A major flood event around the year 1200 would have devastated crops and homes built on the low-lying areas, while droughts would have crippled the corn-based agriculture that fed the multitudes. The very concentration of people that made Cahokia powerful also made it ecologically precarious, potentially leading to deforestation, soil depletion, and overhunting in the surrounding areas. The city's decline appears to have been a gradual process of dispersal. People likely left in groups, migrating to smaller, more sustainable settlements along the riverways, taking their culture with them but leaving the grand urban experiment behind. The story of Cahokia, therefore, is one of a brilliant adaptation that may have ultimately overwhelmed its environmental base. Its mounds stand not as tombs, but as monuments to a difficult lesson in scale, reminding us that a society's greatest achievements can sometimes contain the seeds of its own transformation, prompting a return to a quieter, more decentralized way of life. The story of Cahokia's quiet transformation is not found on the summit of Monk's Mound, but in the remnants of everyday life. Archaeologists turn to the city's ancient garbage heaps, known as middens, and to the resting places of its people. These unglamorous archives offer a sobering narrative of change. In the city's earlier, thriving decades, the middens contain a rich variety of bones from deer, fish, and waterfowl, evidence of a diverse and nutritious diet drawn from a lush environment. As time passes, the contents of these refuse piles shift dramatically. The bones of wild game become scarce, replaced overwhelmingly by the remains of maize or corn. This tells a clear story of dietary simplification, a growing over-reliance on a single, starchy crop. It suggests the surrounding forests and waterways were being hunted and fished out, unable to keep pace with the demands of a dense urban population. The human remains from the city's later periods add a deeply personal layer to this story. Studies of skeletons reveal telltale signs of periods of malnutrition and physiological stress, particularly in the young. There is evidence of widespread illness and conditions linked to nutritional deficiency. These are not the marks of a sudden catastrophe, but of a slow, grinding pressure, where a population may have simply outgrown the capacity of its immediate environment to provide consistent, balanced nourishment. Interestingly, amidst these signs of hardship, there is a notable absence. The ruins show little evidence of large-scale warfare or violent conflict. While defensive palisades were built, suggesting social tension, there are no mass memorial sites or clear signs of invasion. This crucial detail reshapes our understanding of the end. It points away from a dramatic, violent collapse and toward a more gradual, organic process. The picture that emerges from the soil and bones is of a brilliant experiment in urban living that gradually strained its own foundations. Rapid growth may have led to resource depletion, with forests cleared for fuel and construction and game populations dwindling. The very river that gave life, the Mississippi, could also bring destructive floods that wiped out crucial harvests. Faced with these mounting challenges, the people of Cahokia seem to have made a collective choice. The great city did not explode in conflict, it simply dissolved through dispersal. Over generations, families and kin groups likely chose to leave, migrating to smaller, more sustainable communities along the riverways. They took their knowledge, their traditions, and their identity with them, joining or forming new nodes in a vast cultural network. The empty mounds, therefore, reveal a profound truth about societal change. What we often label as a collapse can, in reality, be a strategic transformation. Cahokia's story is not one of disappearance, but of diffusion. Its legacy lived on in the countless communities that descended from its people, a reminder that sometimes the most resilient act a civilization can perform is to gracefully decentralize, trading monumental unity for enduring adaptation. High on a fortified hillside in the Peloponnese, a city of stone defied the twilight of an empire. While the political might of Byzantium was crumbling, its final, brilliant cultural light shone not from the beleaguered capital of Constantinople, but from the steep slopes of Mistras. Founded in the mid-13th century as a fortress, this town evolved into an extraordinary phenomenon, a last sanctuary for the art, philosophy, and spirituality of the Byzantine world during its final 2 centuries. Here, a unique kind of cultural peak was achieved not in an age of expansion, but in the long, elegant shadow of a fall. As the empire's borders shrank under relentless pressure, Mistras became a magnet for scholars, artists, and theologians fleeing the instability elsewhere. Its churches, like the magnificent Peribouptos and Pantanassa, were not large, but their interiors were transformed into breathtaking galleries of frescoes. These were not the formal, solemn figures of earlier Byzantine art, but dynamic, emotional scenes filled with vibrant color and human tenderness, depicting biblical stories with a newfound intimacy and grace. This artistic renaissance was matched by an intellectual one. The city became a renowned center for the study of classical Greek philosophy, most famously through the thinker Gemistos Plethon, who taught here and whose ideas on Plato would later help ignite the Italian Renaissance. Mistras represented a profound distillation, a place where a 1,000-year-old civilization gathered its most precious elements, its art, its faith, its ancient Greek heritage, and refined them to a final, luminous intensity even as its political body faded. This fragile, defiant flowering could not survive the changing political landscape forever. In 1460, the city surrendered to the Ottoman Empire. Unlike a violent sack, this was a negotiated transition, and life continued for a time under new rulers. Yet, the very reason for Mistras's existence, its role as a Byzantine cultural citadel, had evaporated. Gradually, over the following centuries, its inhabitants drifted downhill to the modern town of Sparta, leaving the stone city on the hill to the elements. Because its abandonment was so recent and so gradual, the ruins of Mistras offer an unusually clear and poignant snapshot. Walking its cobbled streets, you pass remarkably intact palaces, monasteries, and homes. You can stand in the very churches where those exquisite frescoes still gaze from the walls, their colors softened by time but their emotional power undimmed. The city is not a mystery buried for millennia, but a chapter gently closed, its pages left open for us to read. It reveals a powerful truth about civilization, that political power and cultural vitality are not always aligned. A society can be in political retreat while experiencing a profound creative and intellectual zenith, gathering its strength not for empire but for legacy. The silence of Mysteries is not one of catastrophe, but of a dignified departure, a final, beautiful note held in the air long after the song has ended. The frescoes of Mysteries do not simply adorn the walls, they seem to breathe with a quiet, revolutionary humanity. Inside the small, dimly lit Paraboltos church, painted figures emerge from the shadows with a startling intimacy. A depiction of the Nativity shows the Virgin Mary not as a remote icon, but reclining with a tender, weary expression, while midwives prepare to bathe the newborn. In the Pantanassa, scenes of the resurrection are charged with dynamic movement and emotion, the faces of the apostles etched with awe and disbelief. This is the hallmark of the Paleologan Renaissance, a final, glorious flowering of Byzantine art. It traded the majestic, otherworldly formality of earlier centuries for a new language of spiritual storytelling, one that found the divine in human gesture and feeling. This artistic brilliance was nurtured in a city built for retreat. The sprawling palace complex, with its great hall and fortified wings, clings to the hillside in tiered layers. Its architecture is a study in dual purpose, designed for both administration and last-stand defense, with thick walls and commanding views over the Laconian plain. Every stone here speaks of a society under prolonged pressure, yet one that refused to let its creative light be extinguished. Philosophers like Gemistos Plethon walked these same steep, cobbled streets, teaching Plato and Aristotle to students who would carry these ideas into a changing world. The hilltop itself, chosen centuries earlier for its impregnable security, ultimately wrote the final chapter of the city's story. When the political winds shifted for the final time and the Ottoman era began, the relentless, practical demands of daily life slowly pulled the population downhill to the fertile plains below. The arduous climb, once a necessary sacrifice for safety, became a burden in a time of relative peace. Mysteries was not destroyed, it was gently outgrown. Its silent churches and empty palaces therefore stand as one of history's most poignant revelations. They show us that a civilization's cultural peak is not always a roar of triumph. Sometimes it is a whispered hymn composed in the gathering twilight. It is proof that the urge to create profound beauty, to seek wisdom, and to leave a mark of transcendent meaning can burn its brightest not in times of untroubled prosperity, but in the very face of ending. This resilient spark, seen in the determined art of a besieged city, leads us to a final, overarching question about all these vanished places. What common threads run through their stories, and what do their collective silences truly tell us about the trajectory of our own world? The same sun that once baked the bricks of Mohenjo-Daro also withered the cornfields of Mesa Verde. These contrasting images, a city drowned by its river, and a community parched by a relentless sky, point to a unifying force in the stories of vanished peaks. Environmental change, whether a sudden cataclysm or a creeping shift, emerges as a recurring actor in these historical dramas. It is the silent partner to human ambition, a force that can nurture a golden age and then, with a shift in the wind or a change in the rain, bring the curtain down. Modern science allows us to read this ancient script. Paleoclimatology, the study of past climates, acts as a forensic tool. By analyzing ice cores from glaciers, scientists can trace global atmospheric patterns across millennia. The study of tree rings, or dendrochronology, provides a precise annual diary of rainfall and temperature. sediment cores pulled from lake beds and river deltas capture layers of pollen, silt, and ash, each layer a page in an environmental history book. These techniques have revealed the mega-drought that gripped the American Southwest for over 20 years, the volcanic winter that followed the eruption at Thera, and the gradual salinization of soil that crippled Mesopotamian fields. The evidence is clear and sobering. Environmental instability was not a rare exception but a common backdrop to collapse, yet the story is not one of simple victimhood. The key insight lies in the relationship. Many of these cultures at their very peak had pushed their local environments to a precarious tipping point. Their success often required an intense reordering of the natural world. The mire of Palenque cleared vast forests for agriculture and to produce the lime for their magnificent plaster. The inhabitants of Cahokia concentrated a massive population on a floodplain, potentially depleting local game and timber. The Khmer at Angkor built a hydraulic machine of staggering complexity, a system that required constant, flawless maintenance to function. In each case, the civilization had achieved a remarkable but often delicate equilibrium with its surroundings. Their cultural zenith was built upon a specific set of environmental conditions: a reliable river course, a predictable monsoon, a stable climate. When those conditions changed, even moderately, the entire sophisticated structure could falter. The intricate water channels of Petra became useless when trade routes shifted, but they would have been equally vulnerable if the rare desert rains had ceased entirely. The ruins, therefore, stand as stark monuments to this complex and sometimes fraught partnership. They remind us that a civilization's greatest achievements are not separate from the ecosystem that hosts them, but are deeply woven into its fabric. When that fabric frays, the tapestry of culture can unravel with it. This leads us to a second powerful thread, one that moves from the external environment to the internal world of the society itself. The delicate architecture of social order and belief that holds a city together. A city carved from rock can still be washed away by an economic tide. The silence of Petra is not the echo of a battle, but the fading sound of caravan bells on a road no longer traveled. Its magnificent water channels and ornate tombs were engineering marvels, but they were built to serve a single, powerful purpose: controlling the overland trade in incense. When Roman merchants mastered the monsoon winds and began shipping frankincense directly by sea from Arabia to Egypt, they rerouted the very wealth that had built the rose-red city. Petra did not collapse, it was simply bypassed. Its intricate systems, designed for a specific kind of prosperity, became obsolete. The ruins show this slow economic suffocation in the gradual disappearance of luxury imports and the eventual cessation of new monumental construction. The city's fate was sealed not by a failure of ingenuity, but by a shift in the geography of profit that its desert fortress could not influence. This pattern of economic fragility repeats across continents. Far to the south, the stone walls of Great Zimbabwe tell a similar story of redirected currents. The kingdom's power was built on its control of inland gold sources and the trade routes to the coast. When those routes shifted northward, following new political alliances or exhausted local veins, the economic rationale for maintaining the grand capital diminished. The elite made a pragmatic choice to move their administrative center closer to the new sources of wealth, leaving their stone enclosures as a magnificent but abandoned shell. In both cases, the cities were victims of their own specialized success. They had become exquisitely adapted to a particular economic niche, and when that niche vanished or moved, their reason for being evaporated. The archaeological evidence for this is often found in the layers of everyday life. Before a city is fully abandoned, its material culture begins to simplify. The fine, imported pottery from distant lands becomes rarer, replaced by cruder, locally made ware. Workshops that once produced luxury goods for export fall silent. The variety of goods found in homes diminishes. This is the quiet prelude to departure, a society gradually becoming poorer in connections long before it becomes empty of people. These stories reveal a difficult truth about civilization. A city can be a masterpiece of urban planning, a triumph of art and engineering, yet remain utterly vulnerable to decisions made in distant ports or the discovery of a new maritime route. Its prosperity is often tethered to invisible networks of exchange that are far larger and more volatile than the city itself. This ancient lesson resonates with a particular clarity today. Our modern world is woven together by digital and logistical networks that can shift with stunning speed, elevating new hubs and leaving former centers struggling to adapt. The ruins of Petra and Great Zimbabwe stand as silent sentinels, reminding us that no center of culture, however brilliant, is an island. Its golden age is always sustained by a fragile web of relationships, and when those threads are cut by the unpredictable scissors of economic change, even the most enduring stone can become a monument to a forgotten crossroads. A society can master its rivers and yet be undone by a whisper of doubt from within. The grandest monuments often conceal the most fragile foundations, not of stone, but of shared belief and social trust. This third thread in the stories of vanished peaks moves from the external world of climate and commerce into the internal realm of human relationships and ideas. Ruins can reveal where the intricate social contract that holds a civilization together began to fray, long before the final resident walked away. The evidence is subtle but telling, written in the patterns of construction and the sudden silence of communal ambition. Consider the vast plazas of Cahokia. Building Monk's Mound required the coordinated labor of thousands, a collective act of faith in a shared vision, and the leaders who commanded it. For generations, this social engine powered the city's rise. Yet, later archaeological layers tell a different story. The repeated construction of large, defensive wooden palisades around the central precinct is a powerful clue. These were not built against a distant, unknown enemy, but likely in response to tension much closer to home. Such fortifications suggest periods of internal conflict, perhaps competition between elite factions, unrest among a population facing hardship, or friction with neighboring communities. A society that once channeled its energy into raising temples to the sky was now diverting that energy into building walls against itself. This shift represents a critical drain on resilience, a sign that the unifying ideology or the perceived fairness of the social order was weakening. When people begin to see each other or their rulers as the primary threat, the collective will needed to maintain a complex urban system can evaporate. A different kind of internal transformation unfolded at Angkor. The shift from state-sponsored Hinduism to Theravada Buddhism was more than a change in ritual. It was a profound reordering of the spiritual and political universe. The earlier worldview centered on the Devaraja, the god-king, a divine ruler whose earthly temple mountain, like Angkor Wat, was a cosmic engine ensuring the kingdom's prosperity. This ideology justified the immense corvée labor required to build and maintain the hydraulic city. The new Buddhist ethos emphasized personal enlightenment and merit, subtly decentralizing spiritual authority. The king remained important, but his role as a living god diminished. This theological evolution likely made it philosophically harder or less compelling to command the vast labor forces needed to dredge canals and repair dikes. The societal glue of a unifying state religion was undergoing a quiet reformulation. The ruins show this not through destruction, but through a change in architectural priority. The frantic pace of monumental construction slowed. The focus of royal patronage may have shifted from funding massive public works to supporting monasteries and individual acts of merit. The collective project that was Angkor began to lose its most powerful motivator, a shared cosmic purpose that made the backbreaking work meaningful. These internal dynamics reveal a crucial vulnerability. A cultural peak is not just a moment of artistic or technical brilliance, it is a delicate equilibrium of social agreements. The population agrees explicitly or implicitly to a certain hierarchy, to contribute labor or taxes, to believe in a unifying story about why their society exists and who benefits from its order. Ruins can show the moment this contract breaks. Sometimes it is dramatic, like evidence of fire in elite quarters, suggesting rebellion or purge. More often, it is seen in the cessation of the projects that define the civilization's confidence. When the carving of new stelae stops at Palenque, or when the last ornate tomb is sealed in Petra, it signals that the elite either lost the resources, the authority, or the will to commission such works. The social machinery that turned collective effort into lasting legacy has ground to a halt. The revelation here is that external pressures like drought or trade collapse are rarely the sole cause of a civilization's end. They are the test. The true determinant of survival is often the internal cohesion of the society being tested. A resilient social fabric with flexible leadership, a sense of shared sacrifice, and adaptive beliefs can navigate profound challenges. A rigid, unequal, or ideologically fractured society, however, may find that a period of environmental or economic stress becomes the catalyst for its own unraveling. The population may simply choose to stop believing in the project, to disperse, or to follow a new story. This silent withdrawal leaves behind the most poignant ruins of all, not of a society conquered, but of a consensus abandoned. A single pottery shard from Cahokia holds more than just clay. It contains atoms with a story to tell. This is the quiet revolution of modern archaeology, where the silence of ruins is no longer an impenetrable wall, but a complex code being deciphered by an ever-evolving toolkit. We have moved far beyond the lone explorer with a brush and trowel. Today, the process of understanding a lost city is a multidisciplinary dialogue, a conversation between the patient work of excavation and the silent, penetrating gaze of new technologies. Take the case of Angkor. For centuries, its true scale was hidden beneath a dense jungle canopy. Then, a technology called LiDAR, a form of airborne laser scanning, was deployed. By digitally stripping away the vegetation, it revealed the ghostly grid of an entire low-density metropolis, with canals, roads, and neighborhood ponds stretching across hundreds of square miles. This single tool rewrote the city's story overnight, transforming it from a collection of isolated temples into one of the largest pre-industrial urban landscapes on Earth. Similarly, at sites like Petra, drones equipped with high-resolution cameras now map the vast, arid hinterland, identifying ancient caravan routes, remote watchtowers, and agricultural terraces that reveal how the city fed itself and controlled its territory. These tools allow us to see the city not as a standalone monument, but as the beating heart of a living, breathing region. Meanwhile, back in the laboratory, other silent witnesses are being interviewed. At Cahokia, scientists perform isotopic analysis on human bones and teeth. The chemical signatures locked within these remains act as a lifelong dietary and geographical record. They can reveal whether an individual grew up eating mostly corn or had a more varied diet rich in fish and game, offering clues about social stratification and resource access. Even more remarkably, these isotopes can sometimes indicate if a person migrated to the city from a distant homeland, painting a picture of Cahokia as a cultural magnet that drew people from across the continent. Another powerful tool is ground-penetrating radar, which sends pulses of energy into the earth to map buried structures without moving a single grain of soil. It has been used to locate unexcavated foundations at Mohenjo-Daro and to trace the outlines of buried walls at ancient Roman sites, providing a blueprint for future excavation and preserving fragile remains for future generations. This collaboration between the physical dig and the digital scan is crucial. The excavation provides the context, the artifacts, and the tangible connection to human lives. The technology provides the scale, the pattern, and the hidden connections. Together, they build a narrative that is far richer and more nuanced than either could achieve alone. This process underscores a vital truth: our understanding of these lost worlds is not fixed. It is constantly evolving. A new scientific technique, a fresh analysis of old data, or a chance discovery can overturn decades of accepted theory, reminding us that history is not a closed book but an ongoing investigation. In this way, the archaeologist's toolkit does more than just uncover the past. It reflects our own time. The questions we ask, the technologies we develop to answer them, and the stories we piece together reveal as much about our contemporary curiosity, our values, and our technological prowess as they do about the civilizations we study. The dialogue with dust and stone is ultimately a profound conversation with ourselves, an attempt to find meaning in the echoes and to trace the fragile, beautiful patterns that connect all human endeavor across the deep chasms of time. The silent stones we study also listen to the footsteps of millions. What do we owe these vanished cities now that we have brought them back into the light? Our fascination carries a profound responsibility, one that sits at the intersection of preservation, knowledge, and the modern world's relentless curiosity. These sites are no longer just relics of the past. They have become active participants in the present, entangled in contemporary economies, political identities, and a global hunger for experience. The ethical challenge we face is a delicate balancing act, where the drive to understand and share these wonders can sometimes threaten their very existence. Take the rose-red city of Petra. Its magnificent facades carved from soft sandstone are incredibly vulnerable. The very act of touching the walls, of thousands of hands brushing the same surface year after year, transfers oils and accelerates erosion. The constant passage of tourists, horses, and carriages through the narrow sick wears down ancient paving stones and destabilizes the canyon walls. Similarly, at Machu Picchu in Peru, though its story of abandonment differs, the sheer volume of visitors presents a clear danger. The iconic stone structures and terraces, masterpieces of Inca engineering, were never designed to withstand the pressure of thousands of daily footsteps. Soil compaction, path erosion, and even subtle shifts from constant human presence necessitate strict visitor limits and costly, ongoing conservation work. In both cases, the love for these places risks loving them to death, as tourism, a vital source of income for local communities and national governments, also strains the fragile fabric it seeks to celebrate. This tension extends beyond physical wear to the shadow economy of looting. When a site gains global fame, the black market value of its artifacts skyrockets. Unscrupulous diggers seeking a quick profit will ransack unprotected ruins, tearing artifacts from their context forever. An object looted from a burial chamber may be beautiful, but divorced from its place in the ground, it loses almost all its scientific value. It becomes a mere curio, its story severed, a single word ripped from a historical sentence. Preservation, therefore, is not merely about maintaining pretty buildings. It is about safeguarding the integrity of a non-renewable source of knowledge. Every looted part, every eroded inscription, is a page torn from the only book we have on these civilizations. Yet, to lock these places away completely is also a loss. They are not dead cities but living heritage. For the local Bedouin communities around Petra, the site is part of their ancestral landscape and a cornerstone of their livelihood. For the descendants of the Inca, Machu Picchu is a powerful symbol of resilience and ingenuity. These ruins hold deep cultural meaning and provide economic opportunity. The ethical path forward is not a choice between access and preservation, but a difficult, ongoing negotiation between them. It requires sustainable tourism models where visitor numbers are managed, revenues are reinvested in conservation, and local communities are true partners in stewardship. It demands continued scientific research, using non-invasive technologies like ground-penetrating radar and drone mapping to learn without damaging. It calls for international cooperation to combat the illicit antiquities trade. The ultimate revelation from these sites, then, is an ongoing story. They speak not only of ancient triumphs and failures, but also of our own values and choices today. We are now part of their narrative. The ethical imperative is clear: to protect them not as static museum dioramas, but as dynamic sources of wonder and wisdom. We must ensure that the profound messages they carry about human ambition, adaptation, and fragility are not lost a second time, whether to the slow violence of neglect or the swift greed of exploitation. In safeguarding their stones, we preserve a dialogue across time, keeping open a channel of questions and answers for generations we will never meet. These silent cities leave behind more than just a lesson in fragility. They offer a testament to resilience. Our journey across continents and millennia reveals a recurring, intricate dance. In each story, we see the same three partners stepping onto the stage: environmental limits, economic networks, and the delicate architecture of social cohesion. A shift in one invariably strains the others. A drought tests a society's unity, a new trade route challenges its economic model, and internal strife leaves it vulnerable to a changing climate. The ruins are not tombstones for failure, but archives of profound human achievement. They show us societies that reached dazzling heights of art, engineering, and communal living, proving what is possible when human creativity and cooperation align. Their ends are not judgments, but chapters in a much longer human story of adaptation and transformation. The mire of Palenque did not vanish; their descendants thrive today. The people of Cahokia dispersed to sow their culture across a continent. The kingdom of Zimbabwe moved its capital to follow opportunity. These are stories of change, not extinction. In this light, the whispers from these empty streets carry a powerful resonance for our own time. We too are navigating unprecedented environmental change, living within a breathtakingly interconnected yet fragile global economy, and grappling with questions of social trust and shared purpose. The ancient patterns feel unsettlingly familiar. The writer Rebecca Solnit offered a key to understanding this, noting that ruins remind us the city is not a fact but a process. No civilization is a finished monument. It is a continuous collective project, always under construction and always subject to revision. This is the ultimate gift from these silent teachers. They free us from the illusion of permanence and invite us to think like stewards of an ongoing process. We can look at our own world and ask, how are we managing our environmental partnerships? How resilient are our economic and social networks? What unifying stories are we building for the future? The call from the dust is not one of despair, but of mindful engagement. We can honor these lost peaks by supporting the preservation of their stories, by ensuring the ruins and the knowledge they hold are protected for the curiosity of generations to come. Their legacy is a compass, not a map. It points toward the enduring values of adaptability, foresight, and community that have always been the true foundations of any lasting golden age. We would love to hear which city's story spoke to you most deeply. Was it the hydraulic genius of Petra, the communal spirit of Mesa Verde, or the defiant renaissance of Mistras? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you want to continue exploring history's deepest mysteries together, be sure to subscribe.